Yandex Cloud is a service that provides rental services of a virtual resources, and this service we will use to create a virtual machines of the load testing stand. Before you start, check out the pricing policies of this service by following the link in the table. For newly registered users, the service provides free tariffs. The table above shows the algorithm of actions that we will automate, but first we will execute this algorithm using HTTP request in the Postman. Before we start, it is necessary to analyze the action presented in the algorithm in more detail. First of all, it is necessary to exchange the so-called OAT token for a temporary IAM token, with the help of which the virtual machines of the stand will be ordered. Next, we need to generate a private key, which we will save to the local working machine, as well as a public key, which we will transfer to the newly created virtual machine. Then, using the value of IAM token and the value of the public key body, a request for creating a virtual machine is sent. And after that, the algorithm will save the IP addresses of the created machines in the host ini file. It will be used by Ansible algorithms that we will create in the future. Now let's get an OAT token. This can be done by following the link specified in the table. The token has been received. Next, you need to create a private and a public key. But now I demonstrate only the process of creating a virtual machine and we will not connect to it. Because of this, we do not need to generate a private key, so I have already added the value of the public key to the collection. This value will be used by default. To order a virtual machine, we need information about the cloud folder in which it will be created. To get this information, you need to follow the link indicated in the table, study what folder is, create this folder and get its ID. And use this ID in further requests. Now let's exchange an OAT token for an IAM token. First, you need to import a collection of requests into the Postman program, as well as environment variables. This file contains variables, and here are the requests. The OAT token that was received earlier should be added to the value of the corresponding variable. Now we can get a temporary IAM token. The token is received and it is stored in a variable. And now we will get the information about the cloud folder, the need to create which was mentioned earlier. Here we are interested in the subnets that belong to the folder. The subnet ID of your choice must be used in the request body to create a virtual machine. So if you use this ID, this zone, then a virtual machine will be created in the selected zone. Now let's look at request that creates a virtual machine. In this request, you must specify the cloud folder ID, the zone, the platform type, the amount of resources to be allocated, the value of the public key, the disk specification, the image ID, in this case it is Ubuntu 20.4, the subsystem ID, and the preemptible parameter. This parameter means that the machine will be interruptible. Now you can send a request to create a virtual machine. A virtual machine is being created, and we can update the status with the next request. The virtual machine is starting and should already be displayed in the Yandex Cloud interface. It is obvious that the machine has been successfully created and corresponds to the parameters that were set earlier in the request. Now it remains only to automate these actions in Ansible. The actions that I have just demonstrated have already been automated by me in the corresponding playbook. It can be found in the Ansible, Cloud, Yandex folder. This playbook will run on a local working machine and it will create remote virtual machines of the load testing stand. Let's look at how it works. In the connection, we specify the machine on which the actions need to be performed, and in the roles we specify these actions. So we call Yandex role, and this role consists of various directories. The first one contains default variables. By their name you can easily guess what they mean. Nevertheless, it is necessary to comment in more detail the following. After the virtual machines are created, their IP addresses will be written in the host.ini file, which is contained here. IP addresses will be set according to the role of the machines. Next, a private and a public key will be created. Also, the private key will be copied to the putty directory, the purpose of which I will tell you in the following videos. And here it is, the so-called OAT token. It will need to be exported to Ubuntu environment variables so that the Ansible picks it up during the playbook execution. The var directory contains other variables. They are responsible for the amount of resources that will be allocated to the machines. It contains 3 machines. Each of them will get the same amount of resources. 2 CPU cores, 4 GB of RAM, and 10 GB of disk. A little below there is useful information that will be helpful when calculating the cost of renting virtual resources. But as I said earlier, Yandex Cloud has various tariffs that will cover this cost. Now let's analyze the template directory. We have already seen this template in Postman. The variables that were presented in the defaults directory and the vars directory will be set into the template body. And now let's move on to the main directory, the task directory. The main file specifies the sequence of tasks in which they will be executed. First, the task of creating a private and public key will be launched. Each step of the task has a name, from which it is clear what it is responsible for. Let me briefly tell you about each of them. First, we delete the private key if it was created by us earlier. We do the same with the public key. We clear the putty directory, then create a private and a public key. And we make a copy of the private key in the putty directory. The next task that is called is getting a token. Here we execute a post request and get a token. We save it as a variable. The next task is responsible for creating virtual machines. The necessary variables are loaded first. After that, the value of the public key is read and set to the public key variable. Next, we run in a loop for each instance in the instances file. First it is monitoring instance, then web server, then load generator. So the variables that are specified to the instance of virtual machines will be set to the body of the create VM template. Then HTTP request will be sent for each instance. After the requests are sent, a special variable is created in which the order IDs will be stored. For example, here is the ID that we received when creating a machine with the monitoring role. We save the received IDs to a variable and start making 20 attempts with the interval of 30 seconds to check that the machine has been created and is in the running status. After the machine has switched to the running status, we save its public IP address. And we save these public addresses to the VMS running variable. After that, it remains to add public addresses to the host ini file, and the corresponding task is started for doing this. Now it remains only to launch our playbook. To do this, I open Ubuntu. Well, I have moved to the Windows subsystem for Linux, and I am in the root directory of the project. I am switching to the Ansible, Cloud, Yandex. Exporting a variable with an OAT token. Here it is. It remains only to launch the playbook. There is a file in the Ansible folder, readme.md, from which you can copy the command to execute. The process has been started. We can see how the playbook is being executed by the console output. All actions that were listed in the main file are performed. The variables that were set in defaults and var are used, as well as some variables are set into the create VM.json template. Now we expect that their public IP addresses will be added to the host ini file after the virtual machines are created. That's it, the playbook was executed and the public addresses had to be added to the host ini file. These are our IP addresses. As we can see, two variables have been added next to the IP addresses. What do they mean? They mean that the future playbooks will use this additional configuration as follows. For example, when the playbook will be executed and it will need to perform an action with the host with the monitoring role, it will connect to this IP address under the Ubuntu user and use the private key that was created earlier to connect. Now let's make sure that our machines have been successfully created in the cloud. Yes, we see 3 virtual machines and 3 disks that are allocated to machines. 1, 2, 3. But I will delete these disks because they were created by me in previous debugging runs. That's it.